Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
And welcoming you back into Primetime Sports, Brendan Slaughter alongside Keenan Puncoachers. We are back for winter term. Primetime Sports getting back underway. It's been a nice long break, about 5 weeks without anything real big going on, at least from our vantage point. But nevertheless, there was a lot of sports stuff that happened when we were gone, both Oregon State, Oregon, Portland Trailblazers. Been a ton of stuff going on. We'll get into all of it here momentarily, but just want to welcome you guys back. Hope you had a great holiday, and Keenan and I are excited to get back in with you guys.
Yes, we are. It is good to be back a little bit later. Lots going on up here in the Student Experience Center. We got an open house event tonight that was open to everyone here on campus to get involved, so went a little bit late. But nevertheless, we are back on air.
Yeah, definitely excited to be back on air and be back here at the KBVR studios. Missed being on air, and there was we missed a lot. There's no way we can cover everything that happened in the last 5 weeks regarding Oregon State Blazers and Oregon State men's and women's basketball, but we'll try to do our best for Oregon State men's basketball. It's been a rough stretch since we saw you last. We hope you tuned into the Far West Classic, Dam City Classic, that happened up at the Moda Center. That was Josh Warden, myself, and Keenan and myself as we broadcasted Oregon State's 2 losses up there, and then Oregon State hasn't done much since, only getting a win against Kent State, but dropping their first 4 games in conference. To recap with them, the Oregon State women's basketball team's been on an absolute tear since we left y'all and have risen all the way to number 10 in the country after dispatching of Stanford Cardinal in Palo Alto this last week on Sunday, getting their first ever win in Palo Alto. You heard me right, folks. First ever win. 29 times Oregon State had gone into Palo Alto and come away unsuccessful, but number 30, they got the victory, and Oregon State's now slingshotted into the top of the Pac-12 standings and are alone in first place in the Pac-12. They have one more ranked program to go in this brutal stretch for them. Take on the UCLA Bruins this Friday in Pauley Pavilion. Another road game for the Oregon State women. And for the Portland Trailblazers, it's been an up and down campaign, mostly down. The Blazers had a couple really bad losing streaks in there, losing some real nail-biter games over the break, and they just didn't look like they had that it factor. I think they're still trying to find themselves as a team, but the Blazers are still looking for some consistency. So we'll get to that momentarily, and we'll get to the Blazers a little bit later in the show. But let's start first, Keenan, with just giving a real quick update on Oregon State men's basketball. They've struggled significantly this year. What's been some of the reasons they've struggled other than injuries? And positive bit of news, Trace Tinkle may return this Saturday.
Yeah, I think injuries has been pretty big. I mean, Trace being hurt has been significant to say the least. And I think for a lot of people who are big hoop fans out there, I think when we lost Gary Payton II, I think a lot of fans knew that the team would be on a little bit of a downhill slope, but I just think that the extent of what he did for the team has been, I guess, magnified with this losing streak. Obviously, it was a bit of a bummer to travel to Portland and watch 2 losses to arguably 2 teams they should have beaten. So, but and we've heard from Tinkle that Coach Tinkle, that the team just has to keep fighting through it, and they're a young team. There's a lot of people still trying to figure out their own. So I think it's just going to be a learning process, and I think a lot of what we've seen in the football team is fair to say it's happening to the basketball team, and slowly but surely they're going to rise. But we lost a huge role player, and I think anytime a team does that, there's going to be some struggles. Yeah, some struggles for sure, given everything that's happened to the Beaver men's basketball team, and they are now a 4-12 overall and have had a really rough season. We'll transition over to women's basketball here shortly, but I want to give just jump over a few of the sports headlines that have really dominated today. Let's look at the biggest one. Just a few moments ago, San Diego Chargers moving to L.A. Yeah. At least reports, sources, they're going to move. They've notified Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, that they're going to move. And just like that,
after 2 decades of not having an NFL team, LA looks like they're going to have 2 next year. And not to mention the Chargers and now Rams will have to share the Coliseum until the new stadium in Inglewood is done.
Yeah.
That could cause a little bit of a... It feels like that could be a little challenging.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you have obviously the University of Southern California football
Trojans
team
too.
already there. Yeah, and I mean that's interesting. I think you might now have the second most boring program in Los Angeles in the Chargers, both the Rams and Chargers. I think the Rams already took the cake for being the most boring thing happening in Los Angeles right now. So it's interesting. The news just broke, but I think some sports fans out there knew this might be happening already. But I think if these teams want to be noticed, if these teams actually want to get a fan base, they're going to have to start winning. Both of these programs are, and ironically, both programs are without coaches still right now. And so really, everyone likes to say the Browns are kind of a dumpster fire, but I see these two teams potentially on a downhill slope, struggling a little bit if they're gonna continue to have their losing ways. Obviously, San Diego plagued with injuries, but they fired their head coach, not getting it done. The Rams fired Jeff Fisher earlier in last season. And so I think both of these programs need to step it up a bit because all the pressure is on LA. And like people say out there, you have to win to fill the seats.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the button there, Keenan. It's challenging. I personally think the city of San Diego made a mistake here. I think San Diego is a much better market for football than St. Louis was. The fact that the city didn't want the Chargers, it's not like St. Louis where they wanted to keep the Rams and the Rams wanted to go. The city of San Diego didn't want them. They didn't want them. Like the Chargers probably didn't mind staying. And the craziest thing is the Raiders still might move to Vegas before things are all said and done at the end of the year. Yeah. The Raiders still might, in the next week, we can see that happening too. Chargers will not be in Qualcomm Stadium. That stadium is an old eyesore at this point. They needed a new stadium. The city wouldn't support it. And now you're gone. You lost a major sports franchise. What do you have now?
Yeah.
What, the University of San Diego State in San Diego? They have a hockey team?
No, the Los Angeles Kings do.
Yeah.
There's about 7 teams in LA now.
Yeah, so
Plus,
what does San Diego have?
No.
What, the SeaWorld? Is that the best we're going to do? Really, folks? We got SeaWorld, we got Shamu.
They have a big, empty old stadium now.
We got Shamu in Qualcomm Stadium. I guess I guess for you San Diegoans out there, I'm glad you got Shamu and I'm glad you got SeaWorld, but that's about all you got these days. I don't know why you'd push the Chargers out, especially when you have, heck, you know what Portland would give for an NFL team?
Right, and that's what I was going to say, is just there's so many other programs out there that I feel like these teams could be going to. I think Vegas would be a great option.
Yep.
I wouldn't say great, though, just because it is, it's dependent on tourists. But I agree, and I think I potentially, just kind of spitballing here since the news just broke, but I could potentially see a soccer team, an MLS team going to San Diego. I think they got the stadium for it now, and cannot speak tonight. I still can't do it. No, but they can remodel. There it is. Remodel the stadium a little bit. I think.
I think it's beyond that. I think it needs to be demolished.
It might be, but I think potentially a soccer team could go there. You said hockey. I think maybe. But San Diego is such a hub for tourist attractions already. Obviously, they have Comic-Con down there. They have some big events, and so I think. Even though there maybe not be a ton of fans on a Sunday there just because the Chargers have been on a rough patch lately, I still think it's a money driver. And I think, like we said earlier, I think there's just a lot of other cities, other areas that would really buy into a football program. And LA now has 2 football teams potentially that are going to be definitely there. And then the Trojans, you got a hockey team. You've already got your soccer team.
Lakers and Clippers.
Yeah, and Lakers and Clippers. So it's just already in Staples Center. The Clippers and Lakers still share a stadium. So it's interesting to me.
It is worth noting, though, Qualcomm Stadium is 65 years old. That's just not going to get it done in today's modern world of, it really is just an arms race to have the nicest facilities, nicest stadiums, and that's just fact, folks. And, regardless of everything else, it's old. The players, I think Phillip Rivers and even Melvin Gordon were noted the locker rooms are just in disarray and just disgusting. And then, even more so than that, looking at it here, it's not even so much that Qualcomm's bad, but let's go ahead and take a look at the Coliseum where the Raiders and why am I drawing a blank here? The Raiders and the Oakland A's play. I mean, that stadium is actually not too much, only 66 years older. But let's look at just from why the Raiders might want to take off. Keenan, every time there's a lot of people there, they say the sewage overflows into the stands. They say the toilets back. I mean, it's a nightmare.
Yeah.
I mean,
there's a reason it's a black hole.
Well, and not to mention, it doesn't look like the Warriors want to be in that area much longer, too, given Oracle's cross street. That's going to be demolished soon, too. I'm more shocked the Chargers chose to move first because I personally would have pegged the Raiders to move first because Las Vegas is just it's a very intriguing market. Mm-hmm. Having a lot of Vegas football, it's intriguing.
Yeah, especially if it's the Raiders. I just think that, yes, fans might not necessarily drive from Oakland to Las Vegas necessarily, but they have one of the biggest committed fan bases in the country in the National Football League. So I think potentially, they could lose some diehard fans, but
still not that far though.
No, but my only fear, I think, is that what's going to happen is maybe those games are going to depend, like I said earlier, just highly on tourist attractions because you're not probably going to have 20, 30,000 fans, probably double that really in an NFL stadium now, 60,000 fans who live in Vegas who are going to go each week necessarily. So I think for touristy things, I think that's just one more thing that people going to Vegas can do. And, certainly there's a lack of professional sports teams already there. So I could see it as a potentially good move, but I am shocked that San Diego moved before Oakland a little bit as well.
Yeah, and I think that's all very, very good points. So we could probably get off on a tangent for these guys for a while, but we'll go ahead and take our first break here on Primetime Sports, and we'll come back with jumping into Oregon State women's basketball, everything they've done, then we'll get into Blazer basketball a little later. But in case you're just joining us, Brendan Slaughter alongside Keenan Puncocher as the San Diego Chargers have announced their intent to move to LA. So LA getting a second football team, folks. Make sure to keep tabs on that. But we'll take a quick break and come back here on 88.7 KBVR, Corvallis.
Of course, our kids should eat fresh, healthy foods, but there's no supermarket nearby.
I wish we were closer to good health care because of our son's asthma.
And closer to nice homes, decent schools.
But we have none of these resources.
Many variables can shape children's lives, like the zip code where they grow up. Learn how you can help improve your community at HUD.gov/fair housing. Fair housing, shared opportunity in every community. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
Express yourself. Challenge and inspire others.
Grow.
Learn.
Lead.
Speak your mind.
Share your soul.
Because it's your time to shine.
Orange Media Network.
You're on Orange Media
Network. And your mic is on.
You're on the cover. You're on the front page.
You're on camera.
You're on air.
You're on top of the world.
You're on to something big.
Are you ready? You're on.
You're on.
You're on.
You're on.
You're on.
You're on.
Welcoming you back into the Primetime Sports broadcast booth here at KBVR Studios. Brendan Slaughter alongside Keenan Puncocher. It's Primetime Sports Week 1 of the winter. Thank you for joining us. Make sure to, if you're missing it live, we'll have this podcasted up on YouTube. Just go ahead and search Primetime Sports. We'll have that posted either tonight or tomorrow morning on this game or on this podcast. We'll do that for the rest of the year and hope to have you guys tune in and listen to us. So moving ahead now, we just talked about the Chargers announcing to move to LA. Now I want to switch gears, Keenan, and talk about Oregon State women's basketball. They're the talk of the town right now, and for spectacular reasons. Just to give a quick overview, we'll just go ahead and look in here to what Oregon State women's basketball has been able to do over the past, several days.
Several weeks.
Several weeks, really. Yeah, that's absolutely true. So folks, after Oregon State had their first loss of the season, lost to Marquette by 1 point way back in November, early November. Oregon State has now won 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 in a row, including wins over number 9 Washington, number 20 Cal, and at number 10 Stanford, beating Stanford for the first time ever in Palo Alto. last big test on the radar for the moment anyway. They play at number 17 UCLA this weekend, and then at USC. After that, the schedule gets a little bit of a break. No ranked teams, even though the Pac-12 is very, very good. Have number 19 ASU. You have UCLA at home, and then Stanford Cal back at home again to finish off the year. The work isn't done, but Oregon State Keenan's put them in itself in a great position to be that number 1 seed in that Pac-12 tournament if they can take care of business, because Oregon State can afford to even lose one game, given that they have a tiebreaker over most of these squads that have one loss.
That's right. Yep.
So I think Oregon State is they're in a tremendous situation right now, moving forward with what they can do. And I think they're riding roughshod of the pack right now.
Yeah, and you know, you mentioned the Stanford win. That was huge. I mean, I don't know the exact wins for the Stanford women in that pavilion, but they only have 8 losses as an entire unit. I think they're 143-8 there. So I mean, that's yes, it took double OT, but that's as a fan, as a Beaver believer of that women's team, it's pretty amazing to watch them. When really, just like the men's team, many said they were going to lose some talent. They did. They were maybe be on a little bit of a skid, but they've looked great since that loss. That loss hurt now, especially in hindsight, because it was such a silly loss to have compared to some of these ranked teams. But yeah, I mean, it's awesome to see. Go ahead.
Let's just look at this, Keenan. Tara Vanderveer at Stanford. This is total. 901 and 166.
Total at the state.
Total wins.
Yeah.
900. This is just all across, home and away. 901 wins against 166 losses.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing, especially, like I said, for a team that was supposed to be on a bit of a skid. And but I think they've really come together as a unit. I think they've gelled maybe better than they even did last year. And I think it starts from the top up, and I think or top down rather. I think you know, coaching has been phenomenal, as it usually is. I think the players have heart. The seniors are leading, helping the freshmen. The freshman recruits have helped, and so I think it's just a total team effort. And you know, we're even seeing players who might be injured cheering on that team on the sidelines with full passion. So I think it's just a top-down effort, and I think they're taking a lot of people by surprise, especially they're proving they're worth it with these ranked wins on the road.
Showing just the coach that Tara Vanderveer is, Keenan, she's only, since she got to Stanford, since they started a women's basketball program, the program itself has only had 70 wins without Tara Vanderveer. Ever. Compared to the 901 or the 977 that they have.
Yeah.
So that's just it's incredible what Stanford is, and Stanford is I would just say the legacy and dynasty that Oregon State looks like they're headed towards. Because I hate to say it, folks, you know, Tara Vanderveer, she's, you know, getting up there in age and, you know, so on and so forth. I mean, just looking here, I believe Tara Vanderveer is 65 years old. Scott Rulick's in his mid-40s.
Yeah.
Scott Rulick's not going anywhere either. Scott Rulick loves Oregon State. He never wants to leave. Scott Rulick he could make some pretty impressive things happen before it's all said and done here at Oregon State, especially with it looks like it's starting to see. I feel like it's like Scott Rulick said, he told me in an interview yesterday, it felt like a game in March, and I feel like that was almost like the torch being handed over a little bit.
Yeah.
When Oregon State got that victory down in Palo Alto, because that's just, it's incredible. It is. And even last year's squad, who was arguably, no, there's not even arguably, who was the best Oregon State women's basketball team ever. They got blown out by Stanford in Palo Alto. And this year's Stanford team's better than last year's. What does that tell you?
Yeah, it just shows the commitment to playing and commitment to winning. I think, you know, they say the culture of winning matters, and I think that's what Scott's built here. I think just a culture of winning in general. I think he's had proven success last year, and that's translating in recruiting. And you know, bottom line, this team just needs to do well enough so they can make it into the tournament in the first place. But they've exceeded, I would say, expectations, and they continue to do so. no matter what the ranking or the line looks like in their wins and losses, beating Stanford down there is incredibly impressive. And like we said, they still have a couple tests, but they should beat these teams on the road. And some good things I think are in store because this team, unless pending a disaster, they're going to make that tournament, and I think they can make some big noise.
Yeah, and obviously the class is still UConn, as we saw yesterday, and UConn beat UCF, a ranked USF team by what, 60-some points, Keenan?
Yeah, I think it was 68.
A ranked team.
Yeah.
And you had an interesting theory on this, Keenan, because you told me this earlier. Kind of what were you saying about UConn and kind of what they are? I think you were kind of echoing a same point that I believe Colin Cowherd said.
Yeah, and a couple guys on SportsCenter is that it's just, in a way, I think the success of UConn just kind of is a bad thing necessarily for women's basketball in general, just because it's hard to fathom a team that's now won 90 straight, that hasn't lost since 2014. A coach who said he purposefully scheduled the teams harder and so that they could lose the streak but still make the tournament. But this team is now winning by a larger margin than they did when they had their 4-time championship in their players and their talent. And it's in a way it's kind of sad because probably that they're not going to be able to beat. A lot of teams can't beat UConn, obviously. No one's been able to do it in 90 games, and they've made it through 2 tournaments. So it's just kind of one of those things where you have to root for your individual team, obviously like we do here with the women's basketball. But in terms of making big noise, okay, the Final Four is great, but a lot of teams are not even going to be able to make the step and be a champion. But that's why the game's played.
Yep.
Obviously,
eventually UConn will fall.
They will, and I was just going to say that eventually, like Alabama fell in the championship game. Eventually, someone will win, but until they do, the regular season is just kind of a bore because when they're, I think their win margins by 33.5, and that's over 20 games.
Yep.
So it's kind of uninteresting when that's happening, and women's basketball already isn't the most popular thing on the market, so it's cool for a while, but a lot of those other schools probably get down on themselves a little bit because they really, obviously, they think they might be able to do it, but realistically, they're not. Yeah,
and I think you, again, Keenan, just put it right on the button, and it's just like how for a while, I'm sure nobody ever thought that, let me just find a good example here. Arizona would ever fall off in men's basketball when they had Lute Olson and were winning, games and games and games. Nobody probably ever thought back in the day when Oklahoma had the wishbone they would ever run out. Heck, I don't think anyone 5 years ago ever thought Oregon would go 4-8 in football.
Yeah,
that's the nature of sports. You're up and you're down. It's just like out in a couple of years. It could be more than a couple of years. Eventually, the Warriors aren't going to be very good. Eventually, the Cavs aren't going to be very good. Period. Eventually, the Sixers might go to the conference finals. Teams aren't bad forever unless you're the Cleveland Browns, then you are bad forever. But, you get my point. There's ups and downs. There's ebbs and flows. And that's just kind of how sports works. And, everyone thought Alabama was the best team in college football. Maybe the best ever. Could Alabama beat the Browns? Well, Clemson went in there and beat them.
Yeah.
So, there's ebbs and flows. You play good games, you don't. Yes, UConn, Scott Rueck said it to me perfectly. When you have the best talent, and then you get the best talent, you're getting your pick of the top 5 players at each position year in and year out. Sometimes maybe they're busts. That happens. There's 5-star recruits that don't pan out. But more times than not, and I wrote a column about this last spring, Gino Auriemma is probably the best women's basketball talent evaluator there is in the entire country. Also probably one of the best coaches in the entire country. I'm still surprised that an NBA team hasn't given Gino Auriemma a chance because, yes, it's women's basketball, but a good coach is a good coach. I think Gino Auriemma would succeed at basketball, men's, women's, or anything. So, when you have a guy like that who now arguably has more titles than Wooden and is probably the best to ever coach basketball, yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't gotten a chance at a national champion or at an NBA gig. I don't know. I'm just, but the point I have here is that bottom line, the best teams they stay, but eventually Gino Auriemma is not going to be there, and you're not going to find another Gino Auriemma. Gino Auriemma is, like you said, Keenan, he's Gino Auriemma, and you can't replace him.
Nope. No, and that's the luxury of college is, you don't have to pay these players. You don't have to worry about them leaving because of money other than, to the WNBA. But,
And nobody declares early usually. They're
Right.
very, very rarely.
Yeah.
I mean, Breonna Stewart stayed 4 years, and she was the best player UConn probably ever had.
Right. And so, they have the luxury of being able to just sub in and sub out players as they come and go through that college. And so, for the foreseeable future anyway, UConn's going to be on top, and even if they fall, okay, one loss, yeah, the streak's over, they're going to bounce right back, and realistically, I'm not sure anyone has a chance to beat them, and so, I don't know, I think it kind of puts a damper a little bit on the sport for at least the time being, a sport that's trying to up and come and get a little bit more popular, but I guess everyone gives them their best, just like everyone gives the best team their best effort. And so eventually, yeah, they'll fall. But just depends on if they can finally be beaten at the championship level.
Yeah, and they're the class of the sport. So we'll go ahead and wrap up women's basketball talk there. But for those Oregon State basketball fans out there, rely on the women, folks. It's going to be a rough year for Oregon State men's basketball this year, and I don't think it's going to get much better, even with the return of Trace. They might win some games, but I don't think postseason's in this team's future. So with that being said, women's basketball, arguably, Keenan, if they keep playing the way they are, this team is looking better than last year's team.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's more versatility. I think Marie Gulich is a different playmaker than Ruth Hamblin. I think she can move a little bit better, and I think it allows them to switch more on defense, even though she's not quite the threat to score as Ruth is, but still great. And I also think that even Brianna Brown and Colby Orem have stepped up and really taken the load for Devin Hunter too. And surprisingly, Oregon State's finding a way to win without Jamie Wisner. I'm not saying Jamie Wisner wasn't the best player to ever play women's basketball at Oregon State. She probably was, or one of at least. But it really shows how Scott Rueck relies on a team, and that this team could be better than last year's team.
Yeah, absolutely. And, to go off that, I think not only just cares about the team, but I just think, I don't even think he really sees what class you are, what year you are.
Yep.
If you're a freshman, if you're a senior, I think if you can play, you're going to earn that spot. And we're seeing that this year. And I think, that's the true test of a coach is, okay, not just seeing players
absolutely.
for what they are, but for seeing how they play and playing how they should play. And if you're a freshman and you're playing well, okay, he'll start you over maybe a sophomore, a junior, maybe even a senior. So ultimately, I think they're not worrying about, I don't want to say background noise. I just don't think they're worried about maybe the expectations. Maybe they were supposed to be down a little bit this year. I just don't think they're paying attention to that. And I wonder if
that motivated them a little bit.
Yeah,
given the Beavers were picked to finish fifth after going the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm sure it does. I mean, that would probably motivate any team when someone tells you can't. But I think that also just if you go into that game thinking you're going to win, sometimes that culture does pay off, and I think that's what's happening with them. I think that they're showing a lot of heart, certainly, and in how they're playing, and I think that's resonating.
Yeah, and I think, obviously, I am surprised a little bit about how Oregon State has been able to make this transition, and they've done it with not such a deep rotation. In terms of guards, it almost kind of seems like, as we were watching the Stanford game, maybe because the starters played a lot, it seemed like two players that really had an effect on last year, Katie McWilliams and Taylor Calmer, both kind of falling out of the rotation a little bit. How shocked are you by that? That kind of Kat Tudor and Michaela Pivick are getting those minutes.
Yeah, it's interesting, but I think it just kind of goes off of what I said in that it doesn't matter, what you're supposed to be. Maybe, okay, you're supposed to play as a senior or a junior, but I think the talent, Scott sees it with someone else. I think he sees that there's a lot of potential. Obviously, Pivick was a pretty big recruited person.
23rd, I believe, overall.
Yeah, so I think she certainly deserves a chance, and I think that's what's happening.
And she's been killing it as of late. I think she had 19 against Cal, and I think somewhere real similar against Stanford. Just doing very well. And when you have a second option other than Sydney Weiss to score, Beavers are hard to stop.
Absolutely, and that's true of any team when there's depth. And so I think I think right now the players, and obviously you get hot as the season goes on, you learn how to settle in with the team a little bit, and I think the coach, I think Scott, is kind of realizing, okay, maybe I need to play some players that actually are going to make a big difference, and I think that's what he's doing despite whatever class they are. And hey, at the end of the day, it may not be fair to everybody, but the biggest goal is to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll go ahead and take a break. We'll transition next into Blazers and then wrap up with the NFL tonight. So make sure to keep tabs on Oregon State women's basketball and Oregon State men's basketball broadcast here on KBVR FM. Make sure to check out the OMN Sports Twitter account for updates on that as well with this Primetime Sports. We'll go ahead and take a break. We'll come back and talk NBA and Blazers action. And they tip off with the Cavaliers here momentarily here on ESPN. With that snowstorm in Portland, we'll get to that in a minute. So keep it locked right here on 88.7 KBVR, Corvallis.
Victor Bolden, Oregon State wide receiver.
Hey, this is Jamal Reed.
This is Gary Payton.
Jacob Work.
Hey, this is Jared Cunningham.
Keith Costal.
Mike Riley.
Hi, this is Coach Tinkle, men's basketball coach at Oregon State University, and you're listening to KBVR.
KBVR Corvallis.
KBVR.
KBVR. KBVR in Corvallis.
Your college station.
Do you want to keep up with everything from KBVR FM? On our Twitter, at KBVR_FM, you can talk with your favorite DJ, stay up on the latest from our music blog, and let us know what you've been listening to. We care about what you have to say here at your college station, 88.7 FM, KBVR, Corvallis.
I'm Gabby Hansen, junior guard on Oregon State women's basketball, and you're listening to KBVR Corvallis.
And welcoming you back into Primetime Sports, transitioning into our next segment into the Portland Trailblazers, who tip off here momentarily against the defending world champion Cleveland Cavaliers in Portland. Last time Cleveland was in Portland, Blazers knocked them off last season. That's going to be a real interesting matchup this year, given that Cleveland blew out the Blazers in Cleveland earlier this year. Kevin Love had 30 in the first quarter, but that game is still slightly delayed, given that the Grizzlies and Thunder have gone in the final minute. And, you know, if ESPN made this game happen, Keenan, I'm sure they're going to wait every last bit until that other ESPN game's over to put this one on.
Yeah, you know, and obviously we have nothing on the ground out here but some precipitation in the rain, but we know up in Portland it's pretty crazy with the snow, and we're seeing lots of pictures of that. So
over a foot now.
Yeah, but game on, and there may not be many fans in the seats, but ESPN is, you know, covering it nationally, so the show must go on.
However, I am going to put my foot down here. I think it's a mistake to have this game tonight. I really do. You could tell, Keenum, and we've seen the players weren't happy about it on either side. You know, both teams got in. Let's see. I know I saw Cleveland did fly into Portland from Salt Lake City. They got in at 5 a.m. and Portland did not get in until 1 o'clock this afternoon. Got stuck in Seattle. It was just an absolute nightmare. And the fact that the NBA made this game happen because it's on ESPN, because heck, it wasn't even this bad, Keenan, when they canceled the Pistons game last week. It was half this bad. And there's twice as much snow now. What's all that about?
Yeah, I mean, the show must go on, and I think when you pay a lot of money to have the ESPN crew out there, you're paying your broadcasters, you're paying your equipment managers, you're paying everybody to go out there, and I mean, if players weren't able to get there safely, I think they probably would have canceled it if safety was of, you know, absolute concern. But I mean, I don't know. It's tough because you have a team all the way from Cleveland. They're across the country on a back-to-back after just losing to the Jazz, and the Blazers were just down in L.A. So, you know, I think given the circumstances with both teams being on a back-to-back, it's pretty fair, I would say. And clearly they're not too worried about attendance issues because, I mean, in a way, yeah, I think ESPN kind of has a right to, I mean, they're not going to be able to just send a crew out to a different game. And, you know, they plan on this at the beginning of the year. They've been advertising it for weeks. Yeah, maybe not a ton of people are going to tune in, but, you know, it's still the Cavaliers. And I think that's probably why some of this weight is, you know, I don't think you're going to have obviously you're not going to have a lot of people watching the Blazers and Pistons. That's why it's not on ESPN. This is the defending world champions, and so I think people in Cleveland have a right to see it. And I think if
national TV though,
yeah, and I think if they can put on a game, then I mean that's what they're supposed to do.
However, with all the controversy surrounding this game, how big would it be, Keenan, for the Blazers to get a win here?
Yeah, it'd be huge.
And use this as a momentum boost like they did last year when they beat Cleveland in Portland by about 20 points of that game and just absolutely crushed Cleveland in Portland, and use that as momentum for the rest of the season. Can they do that again?
Yeah, I mean, they certainly can. It's going to be tough. Damian shot terribly last night, and it is what it is. It's tough because it's not by any means the stretch of the season. So both teams are probably going to look pretty tired tonight and going to try to do their best on a back-to-back, but it would be huge. And I think, certainly any win can build a huge momentum. And I think the Blazers can make a statement maybe tonight a little bit, but, it'll be tough. It'll be tough. I'm sure, LeBron did not get very well officiated, I guess he said anyway, in Utah yesterday. So he's going to probably be a little upset, wanting to play pretty hard. So it's going to be tough, and not many teams can beat the Cavs when they're at their best.
Yeah, and let's go ahead and jump into it. Blazers are now 17-23. They're only 6 games under 500. If they're going to make a run, it's got to be now. And they got to do it on the road, folks, because as you look at it here, yes, they play Cleveland tonight, but then they go play Orlando at home on Friday. That's a game you absolutely have to win. If you don't win, it's embarrassing. You go play the Wizards on the road, again, a team that's about 500, just like you. Charlotte, about the same. Philadelphia, and then Boston. And then you come home and you got another little home stretch. You've got to start to win games here and get back to that 500 mark. Because if you can, I think if the Blazers can teeter around 500 until really end of March comes, because you get that break where you have 10 of your last 12 at home to end the season. 10 of your last 12, only road games being at LA and at Utah. Not super, daunting road trips either, especially LA and Utah, yes, but LA not so much. So that basically, I would go ahead and scratch that. That's 11 of the last 12 in a non-hostile environment. That's just the Blazers got a feast there. So, but to get there, they got a long way to go. And honestly, I think they got to make a run now. They got to start to teeter around 500. They can't have those losses they had earlier in the year. They got to start winning games.
Yeah, absolutely. They absolutely do, and like we've said, they have to win the games they're supposed to. Obviously, they need to beat teams like the Magic in order to secure playoffs,
or not blow leads against Indiana, Memphis, Milwaukee, blowing leads against Sacramento, Dallas. That's 6 games right there. Not blowing a game to the Knicks, that's 7. Not blowing a game to Chicago at home when you had the chance, that's 8. I mean, there's games this season that, yes, they got beat. They got beat by the Clippers bad in the 3rd game. They got beat by the Warriors, losing to Phoenix in OT earlier in the year. Terrible loss. Getting annihilated by the Rockets, getting annihilated by the Hornets, or by the New Orleans, getting beat by Cleveland. Bad. Let's see here. Losing the Clippers. Listen, this is a stretch that's just awful. You lost to Milwaukee. You had a huge lead in that game. You lost to Memphis. Had a huge lead in that game. You lost to Indiana. Had a huge lead in that game. Lost to the Clippers by 1. Before that stretch, when they beat Miami and Chicago, in Chicago, they were 12-10. They had a winning record. Then you go on to lose 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 of your last 13. That just can't happen.
Yeah.
That can't happen. Absolutely can't happen.
No, and it was a December to forget, and even probably early November or late November. But
yeah, definitely,
the team's still growing. The team, it is, and there's a lot of new pieces this year, a lot of new rotations, and they're still figuring it out, still trying to. They're coming to their own, I think, and the defense is improved, and it's just you're gonna have off nights. It's the NBA. It's a long season. There's gonna be nights like the other night when Damian just shot terribly from the field, and CJ's got the hot hand right now. So there's gonna be nights where it's a little bit down. But yeah, the winnable games are needing to be won, and because there's just no excuse for losing to teams that you should win against. And the Magic are certainly a great example of that on Friday. So, it is a long season. There's still a lot of hope to be had. Bottom line is this team, and that's the other thing we can discuss too, is like what really is success to this team. You're not going to win a title. So what really is success measurement? Is it just making it to the playoffs? Is it really, regardless, they're not going to probably exceed expectations by any means.
I think this team just continuing to build and getting that second round again. And again, eventually there will be the year where when like you look back and there'll be that year where it's like it happened a couple years ago, a little bit longer now, where they're the team that's supposed to be good and has injuries and it's anybody's chance at the title, and if the Blazers can bide their time till that happens, so, it could be some years. But if the Warriors like lost Durant or lost Curry, they probably wouldn't be, an automatic guaranteed title contender, So I just think that's something worth noting.
Yeah. So, but realistically, no one's probably going to defeat the Spurs or the Warriors or the Cavs. So it could happen. It certainly could. The Clippers are trying, but that's why I think, measuring success is kind of tough with this Blazer team because, we've already flunked our expectations of what we should have been. And, we've talked about that earlier, last term that, I thought expectations were a little high, and I thought, with this team, they're still coming together. They're still trying to play newly with each other.
Yep.
So, it's kind of tough, to say what does success look like for this Blazer team. I guess maybe just making it to the playoffs. You said the second round. So I guess we'll have to wait and see, but it is a long season.
Bottom line is I think they will make the playoffs. It may be an 8 seed and it may be ugly, but, they're going to make the playoffs. I'd be really surprised they didn't make the playoffs, to be honest with you, Keenan, just because if you look at it, they're better than New Orleans, they're better than Sacramento, they're better than Denver, or at least they should be. And, that's the thing that's a little scary to me is why the Blazers, they're once, I think it's going to be a lot like last year. I think they've really struggled with injury, they've struggled with inconsistency, and they completely had to revamp their entire defense that they did with Terry Stotts for the first 2 years. 4 years since he's been here in like a matter of like a couple game span. And I think now that they've done that, and if it is able to be implemented, eventually they'll start to get the wins.
Yeah.
They've just had a really rough December. And I think I could see him getting like the 6th seed,
Yeah.
Or somewhere along those, like a 6th seed, 5th seed. And, again, if you could get to 5, it'd be better. But I think eventually it'll balance out. The Blazers will finish higher than the Thunder in the division. I think that'll balance out because I think they're a more complete team than OKC. I don't know if they'll get by the Jazz. The Jazz are looking really good this year. But, just want to give a quick update on the game itself as the Blazers are currently ahead of the Cleveland Cavaliers, 13-9 as I'm watching on Gamecast here. And Al-Farouq Aminu leads with 8 points.
Yeah, he's coming to his own too.
So, I don't know. I think there's a positive. There's a lot of hope for this Blazer team. It may not be next year, and I think last year they really defied a lot of expectations being so youthful.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'm thinking. So, anything else you want to add about this squad?
No, just, it's growing pains, and, there's a lot of new faces, a lot of new rotations, and so, eventually, yeah, I think we'll come to our own. We already are on defense a little bit more, so it's just about, I guess, what people think is a successful season and what that looks like to them, because eventually, who knows, maybe they can make a run. I think it's always tough when you do better than expected like they did the year before, and people want that again because sometimes it's just not going to happen. And so far this season, it's been a little rough, but, it's kind of like that in the Eastern Conference too, where you have maybe 3 really good teams on the top, and then the bottom is it's ugly. And the West has kind of looked like that too, outside of that 8th seed, it's just kind of ugly. So
yeah.
It's just, I guess,
or just clustered for that 8th seed, and then after the 8th seed, things get a little crazy.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
but you're absolutely true, and I guess we'll just see what those expectations look like. We'll go ahead and take a break and come back for the final 10 minutes. We'll talk a little bit about the playoff picture for NFL and who's going to maybe have a chance to move on to Super Bowl this year. It's real exciting, some great matchups. So we'll take our last break here on Primetime Sports and come back with some NFL talk.
The Hearing Loss Association of Lynn and Benton Counties meets every third Thursday of the month at the Lebanon Senior Center. The HLAA Lynn Benton chapter is comprised of local, hard-of-hearing individuals who meet monthly to share experience, support, and friendship. Free and open to the public, you and your family members are invited to attend. For further information, you can contact John Hood Feisch at 541-220-8541 or at john@wwmore.com.
A few years ago, I noticed my vision getting blurry. I thought it was part of getting older, but I was wrong. I have a disease called age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. It's the leading cause of blindness in people 55 and older. There are treatments for AMD, but early detection is key to saving your sight. To receive a free AMD packet, call the Foundation Fighting Blindness at 800-585-0516. That's 800-585-0516. You'll be glad you did.
VR Corvallis.
Sean Khalifa, man.
And welcoming you back into the last segment of Primetime Sports here in Week 1. We've just about recapped everything. Make sure to check out our podcast on YouTube. Primetime Sports will be under for everything related to everything we talked about tonight. You can catch up on everything you've missed or discussed. Again, thanks for tuning in. Brendan Slaughter alongside Keenan Puncoach, as always. So we're going to wrap up now as we're going to pull up some NBA standings. I think this could be, NFL standings and what the playoff picture looks like. Keenan, I'll go ahead and kind of pass the torch along here to you with what you think the playoffs could look like here.
Well, do I be unbiased?
Yes. Absolutely.
Well, I think the hottest team in football right now is not Dallas. I think it's the Packers. So
it's like how Brian Rathbone, our own Brian Rathbone, said tonight. Nobody wants the Packers.
No, I think I'll start there. 19 touchdowns, 0 interceptions over the last 6 games. I think 5 games. It's pretty impressive. I think they're going to continue to win without Jordy Nelson. I think obviously he's a big piece, but there's just something scary about the Packers and Aaron Rodgers arguably playing better than he ever has in his career. So I think the Packers are going to be very tough. With that being said, I think Dallas has a shot, but I do think that the pressure is going to get to Dak finally. I think he's finally going to collapse, and I think Zeke can't carry that team alone. So I think Green Bay is probably going to win that game. I really do. I think it'll be close. I think it'll probably be 28-25, but I think...
You think the Packers will beat the Cowboys?
I do.
Do you really?
I do, yeah. And, Jerry World, all that, but home field advantage still isn't something that's really largely considered there. So yeah, I think Green Bay is going to win. I just think they're too hot to stop. I guess moving around Steelers and Chiefs, that's a tough one.
Do you think the Falcons have a better matchup with the Seahawks and the Packers? Do you think they are happy to play the Seahawks as opposed to Green Bay?
The Seahawks are?
No, like if you're a Falcons fan here.
If you're a Falcons fan,
would you rather play the Seahawks than the Packers?
Realistically, unbiasedly, yes. I'd rather play the Seahawks than the Packers. I think the Falcons have a better chance of winning against the Seahawks than they do against Green Bay.
Okay.
Yeah. With that being said, I do think the Seahawks are going to win. I'm trying to be unbiased. No, I just think I don't know, honestly. That's going to be a very tough game. I think Atlanta right now, if I looked correctly, is favorited by maybe 4-6, something like that. But yep. I think it's anybody's game. I think it's ultimately going to come down to the deep ball. I think Matt Ryan said in an interview the other day he's ready to throw that ball deep without Earl Thomas, and I think it's going to depend on
kind of a gimpy Cam Chancellor who's been hurt all year too.
Yeah, and so I think it's going to depend on how they play. I think that defense is going to carry that team. I mean, as it has for a while now, but I still think I think the Seahawks played very well against the Lions. They did what they needed to do. Richardson obviously came on to his own. He was a difference maker like he needed to be. So that is probably the most intriguing game left in the playoffs, in my opinion, right now, just because you have the number 1 offense against top 3 defense. So it's going to be interesting to see how it's played out. But I think the Seahawks have more playoff experience than most of Atlanta, and I think even at home, I think the Seahawks are going to take care of business just because I think just experience. Seahawks have playoff experience. They have Super Bowl experience. A lot of that squad does, and I think under the pressure, I think they're gonna do it. So that game's going to be very fun to watch, though, especially if you're either fan. And I said it to you guys. I said it to you and Brian the other night when we were watching the Seahawks game at his place, that honestly, obviously I'm going to be rooting for the Seahawks, but I will not be too devastated if they lose, because I do like both programs, and I'm kind of excited. My whole thing this year has kind of been that I'm excited that there's some different faces in the playoffs. Obviously, the Raiders just lost, but it's kind of nice to change it up a little bit. And so I wouldn't be too devastated if the Seahawks lost and the Falcons advanced, but obviously I have to cheer for the 12s. And then the Steelers, Chiefs, that's going to be a heck of a game too. I think Seattle should win that game. But it's going to come down to
Pittsburgh.
Pittsburgh. I think Pittsburgh should win that game, but I think it's going to come down to how the Chiefs play on defense. Obviously, I don't think many people gave the Dolphins a chance. So
I think Pittsburgh just has too many weapons.
Yeah,
I do. I think Pittsburgh is in a good spot. I think just when Le'Veon and Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio are all clicking, that team's they're hard to beat. And if they click right now for the rest of the season, that team might go to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying they're going to beat the Patriots in Foxborough, but I'm just saying they could click.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the crazy thing about it, is they could click, and that could be a really, really scary team come playoff time.
Yeah. I mean, both teams could be. I mean, I think both the Steelers and the Chiefs have a legitimate chance at beating the Patriots. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but they have a legitimate chance of doing it.
Yeah, given the fact that Belichick's lost once ever at home in the divisional round.
Yeah, I mean, and it's going to be extremely difficult to win there for either program. But I think Pittsburgh, I'm going to say somewhat confidently, I guess, that they get the win against Kansas City. So I think they will. They should, as they should win a lot of games, and they come on when it matters, and that's the end of the season.
Now, I think the Patriots will absolutely crush the Texans. I don't even think that'll be a game. I really don't. Any thoughts, Keenan?
I wouldn't say they crush. I think New England wins, but that defense is playing incredibly inspired right now. Obviously, Clowney's come into his own. Cushing played a great game on that defense. So that team, as many fans know, that Houston team is based on their defense. But at the end of the day, it's like I think it's like Gruden said when I was watching
Gruden grinder?
Yeah, that Oakland game. When I was watching it, Houston's offense is just good enough to get them by. And
is it like Denver last year?
Yeah, it is. It's in a way, absolutely. And I think even Osweiler said something pretty stupid where he goes, just like Peyton Manning, I learned in the huddles. Peyton Manning may not have been great on offense sometimes, but he turned it on in the playoffs. Well, obviously Osweiler's no Peyton Manning, but again, their offense, if it's just good enough and their defense can keep them in games, I'm not going to go and say it's kind of like the Seahawks, because the Seahawks have a lot more offensive talent.
Oh, a ton more. Twice as much. Yeah. 3 times as much, maybe.
Yeah, but it's still one of those cases where obviously the Seahawks rely on their defense a little bit more. The Broncos relied on their defense. So Houston's a defensive team. I say they get some pressure on Tom Brady. I think he throws at least maybe an interception or two.
Really?
Yeah.
For a guy that's had 1 interception since coming back?
Yeah, I think that this is the best defense he's going to see in
even
recent.
Even though Jacoby Brissett beat them last time?
Yeah. No, well, then
Brissett!
Yeah, and you could say what you want, but that was week 4, week 5.
4, yeah.
Yeah, and this team is now in the playoffs. They just beat the Raiders team.
3, actually, week 3.
Yeah, and they just beat this Raiders team that everyone was destined and blah, blah, blah. So... And yeah, they had a rookie quarterback, and yes, you could say what you want, but that defense is still very good. That defense has won them that division.
That's true.
So I think that defense is going to give Tom Brady a little bit of trouble, but yeah, I don't see a way New England loses that game unless they somehow lose the turnover battle.
Yeah, that's very accurate, and that could be very true. And we'll have to wait and see how it happens. Again, like I said, just keep tabs on those games this weekend. That's actually going to wrap it up for us here on 88.7 KBVR Corvallis this weekend. So make sure to tune in next Monday. Keen and I will have a whole new round of things to talk about. Or excuse me, next Wednesday. Sorry,
yes,
we are on Wednesdays now. I'm already losing my head. So that's a little crazy, but. Make sure to tune in next Wednesday. Keenan, anything else to add before we call it a night?
Go Hawks.
Ooh, go Falcons.
Okay.
And,
you're repping the Falcons beanie over there. I'm trying not to kill you.
It looks good on me.
Okay.
And go Pats. Go Pats.
Oh, disgusting.
On Brady Nation, let's go.
Disgusting.
All right, well, for Keenan Buncocher, I'm Brendan Slaughter signing off. enjoy the rest of the winter term, Corvallis, or at least the first week of your winter term. We'll see you next week. And again, make sure to tune into KBVR Corvallis to keep it going during winter term. And as you can already see, Keenan, the weather today is... we're going to need some positive vibes this term.
Yeah.
So
I'd almost rather have snow because it just rained here all day.
No, it is tragic. So if you want snow, go to Portland. So anyway, keep it locked right here on KBVR FM for the rest of KBVR's programming. Good night, Corvallis.